Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we talk a lot about the home teams. We'll talk some New Orleans Saints. We'll talk about the New Orleans Pelicans. They wrapped up their season. Also, we'll talk about the LSU Tigers and maybe a new quarterback coming to town to break it down for us. Doing dual duties now. Columnist for Saints columnist for the New Orleans Times-Picayune and NOLA.com, and also mid-morning host at Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2. One of the co-hosts of Dunk and Holder, Larry Holder, joins us on the program tonight. Larry, how are you, bud? Glad to have you back. And glad to be on the same airwaves as you as well, my friend.
Absolutely, yeah, good to be back. And it's been busier than normal for a May, as far as usually we start diving into, say, college baseball because things are slow. But no, lots to talk about Saints. As far as the Pelicans and even LSU football, we've got some interesting news coming up. And
also, you know, again, Larry, one of the things you're doing, doubling as a columnist for the NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, but also obviously with the radio show. You've been out on the road. You guys were the Zurich Classics. You got a chance to be able to get a little taste of that as well. The busiest weekend in New Orleans sports was a couple of weekends ago, and I'll tell you what, it's tough. It really makes it difficult on all the sports organizations to be able to have their reporters out, to be able to cover so many things. And when you're doing what we do, when you're doing radio, you got to be up on everything. So it's pretty much, you had to be at like 3-4 different places at one time. Yeah,
it's the busiest, I would say, since the last time the Pelicans or the Hornets in 2008 when they were playing the Spurs in the Western Conference semifinals. You had Saints draft and you had Zurich Classic. But look, it's a good thing because actually that means teams are thriving. The golf event is probably at its peak right now in such its historic tenure here in New Orleans. And, of course, the Saints' interest in the draft, even though they're picking down in the bottom, shoot back up to go get Marcus Davenport, the fact that you've got all this buzz, I think, is certainly a good thing for New Orleans, given so many down years with the Pelicans, and the Saints are starting to kind of get back into the swing of things as far as being in the top of the NFC.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Larry, for those that listen to you on a daily basis with Jeff Duncan, how are you enjoying the radio? Tell them a little bit about the show, when it is, and then kind of morph into what you're doing with the Picayune as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we're on Sports 1280 AM. We were there when they did the flip to all local. Glad to have Eric jump on when he did to follow our show. We're on from 10 a.m. to noon on Sports 1280. We also stream it on our NOLA.com YouTube page as well. Of course, the iHeartRadio app. And yeah, look, it's been fun. It's something that, when we first started working together way back when at WIST, that was an experience, but this is certainly something to dive back into it again. It's been enjoyable. And for Jeff, who's never done it, it's something that he feels he's gotten more comfortable with it and really enjoys it. It just brings a different element to what you do in the media, because in these days in media, you got to be able to do everything. You've got to be able to do this. You got to be able to write, do radio. You've got to do everything, and it's just something that I really think has taken off.
Oh, it has. And look, I'll tell you what, we have a great radio station, we have a great lineup, and when you're listening to Jeff and Larry in the morning, you're getting two of the most knowledgeable people in sports here in New Orleans. I mean, columnists that understand the Saints, LSU, Pelicans. I mean, I think it's a well-rounded show. I think you guys bring in national guests, local guests, but you also give the audience a chance to participate as well. I think you've done a really good job with the format of the show.
Yeah, it's been interesting, the fact that, say, a Monday show pops up, and people are calling in from the show from all over the country because of the iHeartRadio app. We'll have people calling in from Sacramento to Jacksonville and everywhere in between. And it's amazing how people find it, and they're just those who are not in New Orleans per se. They're craving, say, Saints talk, and they'll come and find it. And it's been really a fun ride, especially this season, and especially the proclamations that I make, and now my hair is still growing back.
But it looks great.
It looks like I meant to do this.
Yeah, it came back great, no doubt. You guys had a caller from Las Vegas the other day, and I'm thinking to myself,
he's a regular caller.
My gosh, it's kind of early in Las Vegas, but again,
he's a regular.
He's a regular listener, regular caller.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's cool to see so many people get involved in the show with that. And of course, then you've got people calling from Gretna, Algiers, New Orleans, Metairie, Mandeville, you name it. It's local, and it's got some national reach, so I think that's enjoyable as well.
No, it is. It's a great show, folks. If you haven't checked it out, check it out again, 10 to noon on Sports 1280, the iHeartRadio app. Also, you can find them all the time on NOLA.com, letting you know exactly what's going on with the show, and you can find the show there as well. Definitely a must listen to. Let's start off. Let's talk about the Saints. That was the big story this week. Mark Ingram suspension. I guess one of the first questions is, like, when did the Saints know? Because again, there's conflicting reports on when they knew about the suspension. Why don't you take that first and kind of explain to the audience when you think they found out about the suspension?
Well, the Saints found out about this not 2 days ago, because when the NFL announces a suspension, the player has gone through the appeal process. So they knew that this happened, and then Mark Ingram was appealing. Do I know if they found out about this before free agency? I'm not totally sure. But they didn't just find out yesterday, and now it's total panic, and they didn't know that this was coming. But look, it makes sense the way they went out and drafted a running back. Even without us knowing it, I think drafting a running back made sense anyway, because you really have a lack of depth if you have Mark Ingram and Kamara, and they're available for all 16 games. So you needed some competition at the number 3 back. But now you bring in someone like Scott, and people are going to be zeroing in with rookie minicamp starting up on Friday. Maybe he's someone who can fill in, or you've got some other names on the roster. You've got, say, Trey Edmonds and Daniel Lasco and Jonathan Williams. None of them are really household names, and none of them have a ton of experience in the NFL, really, on a heavy-duty basis. So you kind of think maybe there's some question marks there. I know that it's being reported that they won't go out and pursue a veteran running back. Well, that could change, I think, maybe by the end of training camp. But, look, it's something that this is going to be a short-term blow for the Saints. This could be a long-term blow for Mark Ingram, which I know we're going to be talking about, because there's so many different angles from the story. It's not just cut and dried, he's suspended. You've got his contract. You've got all these other situations that you got to deal with.
Well, this again, the violation of the league's performance-enhancing drug policy happened last season, from what we understand. Am I right?
Yeah, his new agent, because he was with Joel Siegel, a longtime veteran agent for some high-powered players. He's with a new set.
Who the Saints
have
a good relationship with, right?
Yes.
Siegel?
Joel Siegel was Will Smith's agent. He was Marcus Colston's agent. He was Reggie Bush's agent. So players all over the map. But he switched agents, which was a sign for a contract year. But it sounded like, according to their statement, that this happened during the 2017 season when he took the test. Now, when did it come back positive? I don't know. Obviously, it had to have been after the season.
Yes.
So they're dealt with that now. They went through the appeals process. And it's funny, the statement that the agent put out, it was almost like they were trying to fool people. And all it took was, say, my colleague Josh Katzenstein making a couple phone calls and figuring out, even though they said, there was this substance that if you got permission to use, so it wasn't this big deal. Well, guess what? He didn't have permission to use it.
Right.
And, we're going to fight this. well, you already lost the appeal. They're just waiting for the arbitrator's note or extended statement on this, and maybe they're going to sue. Get out of here. You're not going to sue.
Right.
This is cut and dried. In coach speak, it is what it is. He's suspended for 4 games, and the Saints are going to have to kind of figure this thing out.
And the Saints don't want him to sue. Because if you sue, then again, they'll probably get a stay. He'll play for a while, and then eventually, like that star cap situation we saw a few years ago, this thing's going to linger. The NFL seems to have had their ducks in a row. I agree with you. When it first came out, it sounded like, wait a minute, the arbitrator is going to announce it next week, whether he's being suspended or not, next Wednesday, the 16th. And that if it doesn't go the way that Walker Ingram's camp wants it to go, they're going to pursue legal action. I'm thinking to myself, well, the rules are pretty cut and dry. If you didn't have permission to use the substance and it's on the banned substance list, shame on you. And really shame on you anyway, right, Larry? Because all you have to do is go to the trainer and let them know what you're taking, and they can at that point tell you whether it's banned or not.
Well, that's true. Also, what if you're just trying to hide something?
Right.
Just not that I didn't know.
Sure.
You could have just knowingly done it. We don't know. Look, Mark Ingram is really the only one who knows what he did and what his motivations were or were not for this substance. But, look, it's something that, in that statement, they tried to make it out like all of these things weren't in place. So it just kind of looked foolish on their part. I didn't understand it. And they worded it specifically to leave out that, while you could get permission for it, they didn't say he had it, and so that, of course, raises a red flag immediately. And it's something that, look, Mark Ingram, they need him.
Yeah.
He needs this.
Yes.
It's a contract year,
right.
And it's something that, and you don't want to fight it. If this isn't going to be Star Caps,
No.
Star Caps was not just a one-person deal. This was like 5 or 6 players. Of course, you remember Will Smith, Deuce McAllister was involved in that.
Right.
So it's not this big, wide-scoping thing. The Williamses, Kevin and Pat Williams from the Vikings. So,
Yes.
of course, they were big-time players for them as well. So this isn't anything like that. This is cut and dried, and bye, Mark. You're suspended for 4 games.
4 games. Now, let's talk about, you mentioned contract year. 28 years old, going to be 29. He's approaching 30. You're looking at a contract year this year. The best he's going to do is get 12 games. Saints obviously have to make a decision on him. He has said now through his new representation he's not going to show up to OTAs. He's got to go to minicamp. That's mandatory. But I find it strange because, again, he is the veteran in that locker room. He is a guy that you would think would want to be around that running back room. But yet, in this case, even with the suspension coming up, you'd think that maybe he want to spend a little bit more time around the locker room while he can, working out with his teammates, because he's going to be banished for 4 weeks where he's not going to be around them. They're taking a different tack, maybe to put a little pressure on the Saints to try to renegotiate a deal. I don't know if that's the tack I would take.
We haven't seen this really in New Orleans. You've seen this with other players in other markets where they don't go and do OTAs and they only show up for the mandatory things. And we're not used to seeing that here in New Orleans. And Sean Payton even told Mike Triplett earlier today that he doesn't agree with it, but it is voluntary. You can't be fined. And so this is a negotiating ploy. And it's also curious, though, okay, you're going to try to use a negotiating ploy right after you got suspended.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense to me. Why would you do that? It would be in good faith or goodwill to actually work out and do these things. But it's, look, when you're negotiating contracts and new representation in his ear, it's a funny thing when you're going through some of these things and you're trying to maximize your value.
Right, and it doesn't seem like it will. Again, he has little or no leverage now. The leverage he had, it looks like he's lost. And I don't think this endears him to the organization by again, sitting out OTAs, et cetera, and then, of course, with the 4-game suspension that he's going to have to deal with. To me, Larry, the biggest thing that the Saints lose they can't replace is his ability in the passing game to block for Drew Brees. I don't know if there's another back on this team right now that is as good a blocker as Ingram is. Ingram made himself into an all-around back. He wasn't a great blocker when he came out of Alabama. He wasn't a patient runner, and he wasn't a guy that catch the ball at the backfield consistently. He's now a patient runner. He can run inside, run outside. He can catch the ball in the backfield, but one of the bigger things he does is make sure that he protects Drew Brees in that passing game. You surely don't want Kamara doing that because you want him out in the patterns. You want him out running patterns trying to catch the football. That's going to be a tough part to replace, in my opinion. I think you replace his carries in terms of running the football, his catches, making sure that Breeze is protected. That's going to be difficult.
Well, I agree with you there, but you can't undervalue the way he runs the football.
Agreed.
As you just mentioned, he's become a more diverse runner. He's learned how to become an NFL, a bona fide Pro Bowl NFL running back. I mean, he didn't get onto the Pro Bowl by a fluke. He was one of the best running backs in the NFL last year. And he just happens to play next to Alvin Kamara. But there are plenty of intangibles with that. You mentioned the blocking. I don't even know what Trey Edmonds can do. I have no idea if Daniel Lasco is even really healthy. I mean, look, remember last year he had that scary concussion.
Yes.
But Lasco didn't even make the team last year. He came up off the practice squad and played a couple of games before he sustained that concussion. Jonathan Williams, he was on the roster for 8 games last year, never active. We don't know what Boston Scott can do. This is a major question mark now. It was already going to be a minor question mark, even if Ingram was going to be playing all 16 games. But this is a major question mark. And might as well talk about Alvin Kamara. Do you think he's going to be this number one alpha running back? I personally don't see it. And it's funny, on Duncan Holder, Jeff and I disagree. I don't think he's at that point to be able to do that. And I don't think Sean Payton would want him back there getting 25 carries because it limits his diversity within the offense. So it's something that they're going to have to adjust. At least they have time to adjust. They've got all offseason to figure this thing out. And if they want to add a piece, they certainly can do that.
Yep, no doubt. And I would agree with you. I think that Kamara, in a couple seasons from now, has the ability to maybe be that bell cow back. But right now, I don't think he's that guy. And I don't know if I want to put him in that position right now because it will limit you to do other things.
Absolutely, because he's so effective when you get him as, say, a slot receiver or you could certainly line him up in the backfield. He can come out of that and run wheel routes and such and go into motion. But still, his strength is diversity. And just look at his carries last year and his carries in college. Most he's ever had in a college football game was 18 carries. The most he's ever had with the Saints is 12 carries. Do you want him back there 25 times? Probably not. That's why you have 1 and 1A. And most of the NFL, that's the route they're going with anyway.
Yes. So, in your opinion, there will be a veteran that will be picked up, but it'll probably happen in camp, in your opinion? When they were throwing out Orleans Darkwar's name out there, a few other names early. It is a little bit early at this point, considering this has just come to light. I think that they'll take a look at what they have, but I think as a security blanket, they will get a veteran at some point.
A veteran or someone out of a camp. I just assume they're going to add someone. Right. If they don't add someone now, there's the mass cut down day. There's one cut down day. So many people become available. When you chop down from 90 to 53, I would certainly anticipate they look at what they have, and if they see around the league there's someone else better than who they have in the building, they're going to add them. Right.
And then as another part of that, obviously, if you're on the roster the first week as a vested veteran, your salary is guaranteed. I think that will also will play into their mind as well on how they're going to deal with this, because if you're going to get Ingram back and this individual's not going to be on this roster contributing the entire season, you surely don't want him there week 1.
You go through week 1 and then you maybe add him for the next 3 weeks,
Yes.
and that's what you do. And look, that player, if he doesn't have a job, you could say, well, who would want to do that? Well, an unemployed player.
Yes.
So get a paycheck and try to do what you can.
Right. The biggest story up until Ingram this week was not something that was unexpected. That was the release of Kobe Fleener. They get $5 million of dead money this year, $3 million, a little bit over $3 million next year. They saved $3 million against the cap. Never really worked out for the Saints. What are your thoughts there? What happens at that tight end position? You got Ben Watson on a 1-year deal. You got Human and also Hill. They're in their last year, their deals. You got a couple undrafted free agents that are intriguing, but again, they're undrafted free agents. All of a sudden, that tight end position a little bit up in limbo now.
Sure. As far as, let's start with Fleener. That was bizarre from the start. And it's ironic that Ben Watson was the reason why they signed Fleener, and Ben Watson is the reason why they got rid of Fleener. Because they figured they could get Ben Watson back on a cheap deal. Baltimore jumps the Saints, ups the offer, Ben Watson leaves, the Saints go in total panic mode and spend way more money on Fleener than the deal that Watson was getting with Baltimore. So they panicked, and that was obviously a bad move. And Sean Payton and Drew Brees never sugarcoated it. It was pretty telling when Sean Payton saying, well, he's still got to learn the offense. And Drew Brees is kind of hemming and hawing about Kobe Fleener. And then I remember, whether it was last year or 2 years ago, they put Kobe Fleener on the first depth chart of the preseason. They put him as the third tight end. And people were saying, oh, that's no big deal. Nonsense. It was a message sender because they didn't trust him. Totally bad signing. And now they say, guess what? Ben Watson's available. We'll bring him back for 1 year. And you knew the writing was on the wall, especially when they got Watson. And then especially after that, Sean Payton never hid the fact that tight end was still a need.
Right. A must is what
a must. It was still, you had Fleener, Watson, Hooman, and Josh Hill, all veterans, and they still said tight end was a must. So you knew that was coming, and the post-June 1st designation, and so that's fine. And then, yeah, you mentioned the two undrafted rookies. One is under contract. Another one is there for a tryout basis. Look, let's see them get through rookie minicamp because you're not safe if you're an undrafted rookie.
Right.
They could flip you for a tryout guy any minute. So I'm curious to see what happens. Basically, the Saints probably would have wanted to draft a tight end. They didn't have a second-round pick. That was probably the area they could have looked because they had some names there. Third-round pick, I guess they wanted to go in a different direction. They liked Traquan Smith. I was kind of a guy who, maybe an Ian Thomas from Indiana. Once he got first pick of the fourth round, I think they kind of just scrapped that and figured we'll wait till next year in the draft.
Right. The good news is these tight ends are going to be playing for the next contract. So you may get the best out of all those tight ends that are on the roster right now that are looking to be able to get a big deal, whether it's going to be, or an extended deal, whether it's going to be with the Saints or someone else. Maybe not so much Ben Watson, who's at the tail end of his career, but definitely Hooman and Josh Hill.
Absolutely, yes. And so that's at least you have three tight ends who know the system. And this team isn't based around the tight end anymore.
Right.
The Jimmy Graham, when they had no other weapons around there, those days are gone. You've got Kamara. You will have Ingram at some point. Mike Thomas. You like what you have in Ted Ginn. It's a different style of offense where the playmakers are not the tight end. And last I checked, Ben Watson had a good year last year.
Really
last
good.
time he played with the Saints, he played pretty darn well. So people are bagging on Ben Watson. I think that's just fine.
Right. Some rumors out there about maybe going out and getting a veteran tight end, an Antonio Gates. You anticipate that?
I don't. I think Ben Watson is their veteran tight end. If they wouldn't have signed Ben Watson, maybe that could have been the case. And the Gates thing, it's because of Drew Brees.
Yes.
I think that's the connection. But no, you've got three veterans. I think they're completely set. Maybe one of these undrafted guys catches on and you put him on a practice squad or something like that. So on this right now, I think 1, 2, 3. You feel good about where you are at tight end.
Your thoughts on how the Saints did in free agency? Then we'll get into the draft.
Well, I think it's something that they wanted to be aggressive and go after some big time names: Jimmy Graham, Ndamukong Suh, Muhammad Wilkerson, Jordy Nelson, but they had a cap on how high they were going to go. Obviously, they didn't want to go $10 million with Jimmy Graham. So I applaud them for trying to be aggressive, and if you could have wooed one of those guys at the right price, that would have been a good move. But in the end, you go and get Demario Davis. Some people might think they might have paid a little bit too much, but he comes in my opinion, he's probably the best linebacker they got on the team. So guess what? You go with that.
All excited.
I know. Woo, yes. He's like, oh, linebacker who can make some plays. But look, I think that's fine.
I really do like the
I think
sign.
that play is going to be fine. Patrick Robinson, I know people are still having nightmares over Patrick Robinson, but he's coming back a different guy. There's no doubt about that.
And a position he can play.
He can play nickel. And honestly, if he maybe starts ahead of Ken Crawley per se, okay, but when it's three corners, you shift him inside, that's easy. So that's okay. But look, I think that signing's fine. And then, look, you made some other moves there. Like I said, Ben Watson, I think, is a good move. So, look, I think they were calculated and smart in what they did and not overspending on some players. And, oh, by the way, they re-signed Drew Brees, so that was a pretty smart move, too.
They also re-signed Alex Okafor, who said yesterday he's on target to be ready for training camp, coming off that Achilles tendon injury. Injury, obviously, we know Boogie Cousins had as well. It'll be interesting to see, again, how quickly he come back, how effective he can be. Again, signing another one of those prove-it-to-me deals with the Saints.
Yeah, 2-year deal, and if he were healthy, maybe they don't make the big jump to go get Marcus Davenport, and they kind of scale back and see what falls to them. But, look, Alex Okafor, you can't count on him yet. And yet, if he is healthy, it at least gives you something to ponder. You don't have to start Marcus Davenport right away, three-down guy. You don't have to necessarily do that. Also, they've got some depth there. You still got Trey Hendrickson, who they like. I know they've got Al-Qadim Muhammad, who knows what he is. George Johnson's a veteran who kind of came on the scene last year. And Haley Kikaha is still around, even though I think if he can't show something, I think the time might be up for him.
Yeah, I think the bubble's about to burst on that one as well. Let's talk about the draft. And you mentioned Marcus Davenport going up to get him. You know, I've been on the record saying that because of the talent the Saints have on the defensive line with Sheldon Rankins, maybe a returning Okafor who can go inside on passing downs, and of course you look at Cam Jordan and what he is as an all-around player. I think he's going to be singled up. I think he's going to be singled up against either a tackle, a tight end, or a back. I think just based on that, just putting him in passing downs, he should be a very effective pass rusher, just based on what he did in college. Even though, again, it was University of Texas San Antonio, he's got the skill set to be a very, very good pass rusher. He's got to learn and get better at the all-around game, but I think he can rush the passer. I've said double-digit sacks, maybe 10 sacks. I know some are saying 6 to 8, but I'm just looking at, who do you not double team on that line now with a guy and this young guy having the ability to rush the passer? Did they pay too much? Talk about the pick and then your expectations for him going into this season.
Well, as far as the pick, you had to go up there and get him there. Everyone's saying, well, everybody's talking about the price, and I feel like if anyone mentions the player, I'm not sold on the player. I'm sorry. Every draft pundit figured he'd be a mid-first-round guy.
Yes.
You had to go up there, and they did it. I feel like skill-wise, he's certainly all the measurables are there. It's funny how close his measurables were with combine numbers, and people are going to say, well, Larry, what are you doing? You jumping the shark. They were kind of spot on with Jadeveon Clowney, and so he went number 1 overall. And so I think he's growing as a player. And I think getting someone with Ryan Nielsen, who I think is a very good defensive line coach. Oh, by the way, he came from North Carolina State. Oh, by the way, I think North Carolina State had 5 defensive linemen drafted. One of them was the best defensive end in the draft, Bradley Chubb.
Yes.
So Ryan Nielsen can mold some guys. I don't think there's any question about that.
I think that you're right, spot on that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. But as far as the price, I'm fine with the price.
So am I.
People are, they pay too much. These are the same yahoos who were screaming that it was going to be Lamar Jackson with the pick. Look, I'm going to pat myself on the back. I called the pick. I called the team, the trade at 2:30 p.m. that day. I'll just say my theory was an educated theory. I'll just put it at that. But, look, it's something that I think the price is fine. The 5th-round pick, whatever. You got to pay a ton of money to jump up 13 spots. I mean, that just doesn't, they're not going to, here's a jelly bean. Yeah, we're going to move up. No. And they don't have a 2nd-round pick. And if the 1st-round pick is 25, 27, 32, you pay that every day. Who cares? And no one's screaming about a 2nd-round lost pick with the Alvin Kamara deal anymore. Forget it.
Right. The 5th-round sweetener is a little bit too much, but they were in a position where, with no 2nd-round pick, where their hands were a little tied. And look, they said they had targeted this guy for weeks. They knew who they were going to get. They were just a matter. They were willing to go up to 8 to get him. Imagine what they had to pay to get up to 8 to get him. So, the fact that they did, and again, I think he's going to come in and he's going to fill a role they haven't had since Junior Gillette went bonkers and ended up getting banished from the organization. How do you think he's going to be utilized, and how effective do you think he'll be?
I'm wondering how well he can play against the run. I mean, everyone's talking about pass rush. Of course you need that. And Cam Jordan is a rare bear, the fact that he is so great as a pass rusher and so great against the run. I never stop short in saying I think he's the best overall defensive end in the NFL. and people come back with me, Khalil Mack. All right, that's okay, fine. But I still think he's better. But I need to see what he can do as an every down defensive end. I don't anticipate that immediately coming into place. If it is, that's great. And Cam Jordan was when he came in the league, and yet his sack numbers were absent. He had 0 in the regular season.
I can remember talking
0
about that. Again, people wondering, wait, can this guy even rush the passer? And now he's the best all-around defensive end in the NFL.
Right. So it's something that, do you want to see Davenport be J.J. Watt right away? Of course you do. But I don't think that's realistic. Could he develop into something like that? Sure. Could you have bookends? Sure. I just want to see my own 2 eyes. I want to see what this kid can do before I really say, like, I understand your enthusiasm. 10 sacks. I'm not going there.
No. Look, I'm jumping out. I'm putting myself out on a limb here, simply because of the talent they have on the line, especially if Okafor can come back, because he can slide inside. And you're looking at passing downs with Rankins, Okafor, obviously Jordan, and then the young kid Davenport, and then anybody you want to bring in from the linebacking core or the safety. They love to be able to rush the passer from the defensive backfield.
Demario Davis is really good at that.
He
that
really
was
is.
one of his
yes,
strengths.
I would agree. Any other? I really like the Traycon Smith pick. I think he's going to fit right in, especially with Meredith coming in. I think they've upgraded that wide receiver rank. Talk about that before we go to break, and then maybe any other rookie draft choice that will be coming in, and specifically, if you would, talk about Will Clapp, because I think he's going to be maybe one of the steals of this draft.
As far as Traycon Smith, they were totally open, best player available, because I think some guys came off the board right when they would have liked, and so they went with him. I think he could be a good piece the more you read up on him. I wasn't totally familiar with him, to be honest, but certainly played with a good team, Central Florida. Didn't lose a game, had a high-powered offense, and he was an all-around receiver, so that's a plus. So I'm fine with that pick. I'm wondering how quickly he gets acclimated within the offense. And what does that do with a lot of the receivers? You've got a crowded room there.
Yes.
So I'm curious to see with that. And then Will Clapp, I agree. I think that could be a steal. Yeah. I really can. The one pick I do question is Rick Leonard. That guy, it's not just one bad draft review. Every bad draft review. Right. And I think they jumped the shark on that pick. But I could be wrong. You know.
Jamerson, Moore, and the defensive backfield. At least in the beginning, there'll be guys that can contribute on special teams.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what they do with those 2 guys. Jamerson, you can probably play safety or corner, and I think you bring in those 2 guys. And I did a piece maybe a week ago, players who were in jeopardy. I threw P.J. Williams on that list. You're not adding 2 guys and getting Patrick Robinson, and you got other guys in the building. He's in the final year of his deal. And right now he's the 4th corner at best on the team. So curious to see what happens.
And they say Boston Scott is a guy that I don't want to call him a Darren Sproles clone, but he has similar attributes to Sproles.
Yeah, the size is where you get the comparison. I want to see him with my own 2 eyes too, and I'm curious to see, especially starting this weekend, what kind of role they start trying to maybe envision for him.
You got it. Let's take a quick break. Larry Holder is our guest from NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune, Saints columnist, along with, of course, one of the co-hosts of Duncan Holder, 10 to noon on Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2, and the iHeartRadio app. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll be right back.
Air conditioning, heating, and refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhardt has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhardt's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhardt's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhardt's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or AmcoFenceCompany.com.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Tonight, Larry Holder of NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, and one of the co-hosts of Duncan Holder on Sports 1280. That's noon to 2 weekdays. We'll talk Pelicans now. Larry, first of all, season in review. It was kind of an up-and-down season, kind of a stock market season. Started off with doing it big with Boogie and Anthony Davis. Ended up with a team with great pace. That again was a fun team to watch. In between, you had a bunch of winning streaks, and you had a bunch of losing streaks. And, at one point, everybody just kind of cashed in their chips on this team and said they're going nowhere. And then all of a sudden, Boogie goes down. They turn it around. You've talked about them all season long on your radio show. Talk about what you saw and your thoughts on the season.
Look, I think if you don't look at this as a successful season, I think you're fooling yourself. Yep. And you're destined for a life of misery. Give me a break. Yeah. It's one of the most successful seasons this franchise has ever had. It's only the second time since they've been in New Orleans since they've won a playoff series. The fact that they were able to overcome, you always hear, we had to overcome adversity. Mm-hmm. This was major adversity and unforeseen adversity with a freak injury that just happens. How often do you see someone blow an Achilles in the NBA? I don't know. Boogie might have been the only person I've seen all season that it happens to, and it happens in the best win of the season leading up to it against the Houston Rockets. No, I think it's something that I think people should be encouraged by, and I am curious to see how much the carryover goes into next season because they've certainly got a lot of question marks they've got to deal with, and I know we're going to talk about. Yeah. But look, I think the fact that they were able to pull off a trade, say, from Niko Mirotic. You got rid of the albatross, Omer Asik. That's on that in and of itself is a huge win. Yes. But you were able to stay competitive in a majorly competitive Western Conference. I don't think you need to hear, can the Pelicans move to the East? Get that off the table because look, they proved that they can hang in the West, and I feel like this is a starting point. Now they've got to pull the right moves this offseason to keep this flow going. But overall, how can you not say it's one of the best seasons in the history of the franchise, whether it was in New Orleans or in Charlotte?
Yeah, I would agree with you. And look, let's face it, Final 8 in the NBA, Final 4 in the West. How many people at the beginning of the season envisioned that happening, even with Boogie and Anthony Davis? And I don't think many did. I mean, I think people maybe thought, well, they're going to get in the playoffs, maybe a 7th or 8th seed. They were a 6th seed, and they were able to get a first-round sweep and then go in and take on the world champs. And for a while there, they gave them everything they could handle. I agree with you. I think it was an incredibly successful season for this team. And I think it really I think what it did was it opened the eyes of the fans, especially after Boogie Cousins got hurt, on the type of team they could be. This is what Alvin Gentry envisioned, in my opinion. He wanted a team that could play with great pace, that had great ball movement, and we saw that after Boogie went down. We didn't see that early, and of course, a lot of that had to do with Rajon Rondo and the emergence of Drew Holiday. I think this is really something to build on going forward.
Oh, absolutely. And with the team that you saw, they were able to play Alvin Gentry-style basketball. But you can always say the what-ifs. If DeMarcus Cousins was there, could you have played the same style of basketball? And then they're playing the same style of basketball at Gentry once, but let's be honest, the Golden State Warriors ran them out of the gym a few times in that series, so you're chasing them. Are you good enough to hang with them? Or would you have been better off with Boogie, and at least on one side of the floor you would have a mismatch, whether even though you'd be giving it up on offense, on defense, that you would at least have a mismatch for the Warriors. So that's something that they have to ponder. But look, they were able to reestablish themselves and give themselves a new identity after losing 4 or 5 games once Boogie goes down. The fact that they were able to do that I think is a borderline miracle, to be honest with you.
Well, and Larry, you and I were talking about it in the break, and I've talked about it on the radio show. I think one thing that we saw coming out of this series with Golden State is that Anthony Davis is a 4. He has built his body up, but he is not a banger. And as much as he tried, and he gave an effort, he just could not bang with, again, multiple guys trying to keep him off the boards or keep him from going above the rim. They need a physical center that can rebound, that can block shots, and can be a space heater. Doesn't necessarily have to be a scorer. That's Lanyap. So the question is going forward, what do you do with Boogie Cousins? I know they would love to have him back. There was a lot of talk about a max deal early before he got injured. I don't know how, in good faith, looking at this, from an organizational standpoint, you can give him max money. You can give him a long-term deal. To me, I think it's a 2 or 3 year deal. Now we're hearing, at least the chatter that there may be a sign and trade down the line to try to get some assets for Boogie. Again, you got to have multiple partners that want to be able to do that, and there's got to be some good assets coming back. It'll be interesting to see, again, how they approach this going forward and what Boogie Cousins wants, and then how Anthony Davis kind of figures in this as well.
Oh, I'm sure. And there's so many layers to this. And you're going to have to see if the Pelicans want to get this thing right, I think Cousins is going to have to compromise, because I know he's made a lot of money in his NBA career, but I've always say you need to maximize your value, and I will always say that, and I would never fault any athlete for ever wanting to maximize his value. But what is his value right now? I think that is a major question that every side of this spectrum needs to figure out, and I'm sure Cousins is going to say his value is X, and Pelicans are going to say his value is Y. Where do they meet? I don't know. And so is this the right decision? Does DeMarcus Cousins come back and be the same player? Does DeMarcus Cousins buy into what he saw with this team?
Which I think is critical.
This year. Look, DeMarcus Cousins is certainly a temperamental fella.
Yes.
So, and someone who hasn't been on a winner and yet has seen a winner. What does he want to do? So I think there's got to be compromise with the Pelicans, compromise with Boogie. And ultimately, even if they get a deal done, I don't know. Does it come back to bite you if he can't recover?
Sure.
And if he's not the same player? Look, personally, I'm glad I'm not having to make the decision because there are concrete reasons to do it. There are concrete reasons not to do it. And it's going to be a risk regardless of what decision you make.
Well, the biggest fear is he turns into a 6'11" jump shooter, and you don't want that. You need someone that can come in, as I mentioned before, physical inside. If he could do that for the rest of his career, it would be a huge boost for this team. Look, it may be the situation now where they let him go out and get the best deal he can, and then they decide whether they want to match the deal or not. That might be the situation. Now, he may feel slighted by that. But at the end of the day, there are so many unknowns now with the Achilles tendon injury on when he's going to come back. Look, he may not be the same player for the first year. He may not be the same player ever. You might not be able to get Boogie Cousins back playing consistent minutes until midway through the season. So there are so many question marks to be able to go ahead and say, we're just going to give him a max deal because him and Anthony Davis get along and because of what he was. We don't know what he's going to be.
Absolutely. That's the risk that you're taking with this. Also, you've got Nico Mirotic for one more year, guaranteed. So say you play the same style of basketball you did this back half of the season, and then when Cousins comes back, you got to figure it out. And what if you can't figure it out with him? So it's not something that you can just go into training camp and, we're going to work this out, and you're going to have the first few games to kind of mold this thing. You're going to likely have to do this on the fly, and it all goes into this multi-layer thing where I'm thinking if he never got hurt, this would be a no-brainer.
Yes.
But that's the problem.
That's the truth. If he didn't get hurt, they probably wouldn't be playing the style that got them in the playoffs. They'd be playing a different style. Now, look, maybe they would have played a different game and it would have been much better for them with the two bigs and get in the playoffs where things kind of slow down, where it's a much more physical game. Things might have been a little bit different for the Pelicans. Maybe they advanced even further. But we don't know that at this point. But what we do know is it's a very tough injury for a center, a big man to come back from, and he's going to have to deal with that. And to me, I think that you have to look at, again, the organization more than anything else on what you're going to do with the future. The big question mark in all of this is how Anthony Davis reacts to this, because he's already said multiple times he wants him back. And a lot of times the superstar gets what they want.
A lot of times, but Anthony Davis is still under contract, and you hold his rights, and he can, if you don't go the way he wants to go and he has hurt feelings, well, guess what? You're still paid to play basketball, and that's part of the business. I mean, you look at football. Drew Brees, he hasn't gotten every move that he's ever wanted, and so you got to play and be a professional, and that's only one part of it. You can't judge your whole decision by it. And people accuse LeBron James of doing this full facelift of a team halfway through the season. Now, of course, they're in the Eastern Conference Finals, so maybe that was the right move. But still, you still have to be a professional, and LeBron James has the resume to make those calls. Yes. Anthony Davis has been to the playoffs twice. He's won one series, and even though he's a superstar player, it's only part of the process of this decision-making. It shouldn't be the end-all, be-all. If he says, I want him back, you got to go get him back.
To me, the must-have coming back is Rajon Rondo. And for what he did off the court, what he did on the court, his ability to be able to almost be a coach on the court, the leeway that was given to him by Alvin Gentry to again be almost a coach on the court, and then again how he played, because he played still like a young man. Chicago gave him $10 million to go away. The Pelicans only paid him $3.3 million this year. The mid-level exception for next year is $8.8 million. Is that enough to be able to ask Rondo to take, and would he be satisfied with that coming back to New Orleans, or is he going to want more money? And then at that point, you got to worry about the luxury tax threshold. How critical do you think it is for Rajon Rondo to come back to this team?
Oh, I think he's a plus. And it's funny, his comments after the final Game 5, he talked about how great it is to have team chemistry, and he sees that with the Pelicans, and he says, look, these teams get flipped around all the time, but who's the defending NBA champions who's won 2 of the last 3 years and really could have easily been a 3-time champion in a row and going for 4 in a row? And he's saying they've had the same players and maybe added a piece like Durant, but they've had the main core has been there for quite a few years now. And yet he follows that up with, well, we'll see. It's a business. And he's been in the league long enough, and that's what it is. You're not going to make any, I'm coming back, guarantees. You're not going to do that. And again, I know Rondo's made a lot of money in his career, but if I'm an athlete, I want to maximize my value because I'm not doing this for my entire life.
True. And again, rarely do you get a hometown discount like what Breeze gave to the Saints in any other league. It rarely happens in football.
And you're not getting one from Rondo. He's been in New Orleans for a year. He's not some hometown.
No doubt about it. Well, that leads to the next question. And I said on this program, my radio show, Tom Benson made the money, and again, he spent every nickel he could within the parameters of the cap. It never seemed like a situation here in New Orleans where it was in the best interest of the club to go over the franchise, to go over the luxury tax threshold. The question is, how would Gail Benson approach this? She inherited the money. Is she a person that will look at this and say, you know what, I'll add these pieces because it will give me a chance to get a championship while Anthony Davis is here? I think that's a big question for the organization going forward. Will the path they were on change with the NBA team, because you have the ability to go over the cap and pay the luxury tax threshold, to add the players so that the Pelicans can compete like in Oklahoma City or Golden State or some of these other super teams that have been out there?
I don't know her mindset, but she certainly has the ability to put her stamp on her style. And I remember when she sat down with us right after the death of Tom Benson at the owners' meetings, she said that she certainly feels like she has the capability of making the tough decisions. And I'm thinking, and that question, it was insinuating, are you willing to fire someone? But this is a major decision, and you got to look at it in certain ways as far as, yeah, you might be spending money at this point, but if your team becomes a consistent winner, your team becomes more valuable.
Yes.
So it might be a good investment because, look, the Golden State Warriors weren't worth as much as they are, say, 20 years ago. Sure. They invested, they're over it, and now they're champions and have some of the best players in the world, and it's paying dividends. So you could maybe spend a little money, and it could help you make some money, but look, it's something that I don't think we know. We're going to find out.
Yeah, we are.
We're going to find out.
It's something she may have to make a decision on this year, because they're going to be up against the luxury tax threshold as they've been. If they don't re-sign Boogie Cousins, they got about $10 million left under the cap, so they're in a tough spot there. That's why everybody's been talking about the sign and trade lately. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And then the other part of this is we're hearing that Alvin Gentry and Dell Demps are going to return. What type of a contract are you going to give them? Are you going to give them a contract that maybe mirrors Anthony Davis's 2 years left on his deal with a player option? What happens there, in your opinion?
Well, I don't think it's just going to be some maybe 1 year thing. I don't think that's what they would want to do. I don't think that's what Demps and Gentry would want to do. But I'm curious to see. Honestly, I think did Gentry say that he just got this 1 year extension, so he basically has another year?
They picked up his option from what I understand.
So he's basically got one more year
and they
now.
were saying that they were working on a long-term deal with him, which again, what's long-term? Now, he's proved that if you give him the pieces, his system will work, but does Boogie Cousins one of those pieces? And then, can Dell Demps be forgiven for all the things that went wrong with this team simply because he made a deal for Mirotic, because this team has kind of turned around? I mean, he pushed some of the right buttons this year. Let's give him some credit for what he did, even bringing Boogie Cousins in, even though it was a desperate move. But do you forget all the failures of before and wipe the slate clean? Apparently, it looks like they're going to go in that direction right now.
That's what it seems like to me that they're going to do. And look, the Saints have made mistakes, and they've stayed loyal to, say, Mickey Loomis. They've stayed loyal to Sean Payton, and a lot of those mistakes we were talking about for quite a few years. Right. 14 season, 15 season, 16 season, now 17 season, all as well. So maybe it's the same mindset with the Pelicans, all as well. And I do think, though, that it's going to be curious to see how they navigate with the money this offseason, how much. And here's another thing. If say they go over the luxury tax, then they certainly trust Dell Demps.
Yes.
But
true.
Absolutely. You got to look that way.
No doubt about it. And then again, look, there's some other moving parts here. You've got a situation with Solomon Hill, 2 years, $25 million. I mean, over the next 2 years, that's a lot of money for a guy that's supposed to be a 3-and-D guy that can't shoot a 3, and right now he can't play D. Okay, Alexis Agenda, it's going to be a $5 million salary dump on him. He's in the last year of his deal. They're going to move him. Ian Clark is a free agent. He played a nice role player here in New Orleans and emerged. He's going to be looking for more money. If Rondo gets that mid-level exception, then more than likely Clark is on his way out. And, oh, by the way, they still need a 3, which they've never really had on this team. So there's some real needs on this team going forward with not a lot of money to spend to get there. Yeah,
and I think that's why they've got to get this thing right to keep this momentum going. Like I said, there are going to be a lot of difficult decisions, and I think the money they are allowing Dell Demps to play with will show you how much confidence they have in him. And I'm telling you, it's going to be, for an off season in basketball, it's probably going to be the one that's most paid attention to in a long time here in New Orleans, because they have a good team, but they do have certain needs, and they've got to play dollars and cents and negotiating and getting the pieces right.
Well, and not just that, Larry. What you've done now is you've kind of awakened a fan base. People are into the Pelicans.
Or even created one.
Yeah, or recreated one. Right? So, now there's going to be expectations. And individuals are going to be going, they're going to be buying season tickets. And, it's no longer, although I got to see it to believe it, to see if the fan base starts, if the sports fan out there starts paying attention to this team, at the end of October when they start, or is it going to be when the Saints are out the playoffs? That's been the Achilles heel for this team. It's one of the reasons why they're on the road so much in October and November. People complain, well, they're always on the road. Well, because they know this is the land of football, and they don't want to compete against the Saints for that sports dollar. So a lot of times they're on the road early. That hurts the team as well. You'd like to be home a little bit more earlier in the season, but it'll be interesting to see how this kind of plays out going forward.
Well, there's no question about it. I'm as intrigued with this offseason than I have been in quite some time.
Yeah.
Me personally,
sure.
with this Pelicans team.
Well, and it helps us because, again, from a talk radio standpoint, it gives us more to talk about in the offseason, where it's more than just Saints football, or in this case with LSU and the rest of the college baseball teams here in Louisiana kind of being in a down year. You don't have that luxury of maybe talking about going to Omaha or postseason play. But let's talk about LSU for a moment, because it was announced this week that Joe Burrow, who is a graduate transfer from Ohio State University, has been given permission to talk to LSU in Cincinnati. There was first reported that Florida and Nebraska were also in the mix. His father was a former Nebraska player and a former Nebraska assistant. They have not been given permission yet, nor has the University of Florida. He is visiting Cincinnati today. He will be in Baton Rouge visiting LSU on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of this weekend. He is a player that ultimately went to Urban Meyer and said, look, I was injured last year trying to back up J.T. Barrett, who's with the Saints now, as a rookie tryout player. But he wanted his assurances that he was going to be able to either be the starter or the backup. And Urban Meyer wouldn't give him those assurances, so he gave him his release. Now, LSU is really chomping at the bit to bring this guy in, a dual quarterback who was Mr. Ohio when he graduated from high school. Your thoughts on Joe Burrow? Pardon me.
Well, I don't know necessarily think could he come in and look, he's Danny Etling. I mean, he's coming in, he can't play, he's graduate, he's got 2 years left, so it's Danny Etling all over again. But he didn't have the experience at Ohio State. I think he only threw 39 passes his entire career there. But I think it's more about the whole landscape of LSU. The saying, you got two quarterbacks, you've got none. LSU had three quarterbacks. I said they probably got about a -6. And now you say Burrow comes in.
Right.
I don't think you're going to have four quarterbacks very long. I think someone's going to hit the road and transfer somewhere.
True.
But I think it just goes to show you that they do not have a good feel on bringing in quarterbacks. And this is at least these quarterbacks. It's not like Ed Ogeron went and picked Miles Brennan. It's not like he went out and picked Lowell Narcisse or Justin McMillan. These are Les Miles recruits. He had to maintain them when he got the job, but this isn't ones that, and he was so late in the game, you're not going to get someone to flip. True. So you kind of had to play with the hand you're dealt. So this would be Ed Ogeron's first quarterback that he would say, all right, my guy, this is my hands on this. But I think LSU fans, are they going to be able to withstand this? Because let's be honest, it's not like expectations were high for this going in this season.
Right.
And that's not a good thing for Coach O. Sure. He's got to win now. And
with a difficult schedule.
With a difficult schedule, and he knows the pressure's on. And I remember just last year giving Brennan time to compete for the starting job. We heard that so many times when we all figured, come on, Danny Etling's going to do it. And then Miles Brennan gets in there and times and looks like a deer in headlights.
Yes.
And obviously he hasn't improved enough to not withstand competition coming from elsewhere. So this is something that I think it's just going to give LSU football fans pause that, man, I don't know what's going to happen this season.
Especially a quarterback, not having a quarterback in an offense where you're throwing the football. And I think that's going to be one of the big question marks going in. Larry Holder of Noel.com, the Times-Picayune, and also Sports 1280. Duncan Holder, 10 to noon weekdays. Thanks so much for being with us.
All righty. Thanks, man.
Appreciate it, brother.
You got it.
Always appreciate it. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE at 10 p.m. We're also on Pelican Sports Television. That's 9 o'clock statewide every Friday night. You can catch me on the radio right after this guy. He's on 10 to noon. I'm on noon to 2. Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2, the iHeartRadio app. You can listen live, download the podcast at Sports 1280. You can also listen live, download the podcast at ericasher.com. You can get all the previous episodes of Inside New Orleans Sports at ericasher.com as well. So make sure you check us out there at Sports 1280. Also, special thanks to the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Trey Lopez, Naila Jones, and my director, William Hill. Thanks to Larry Holder for joining us. Thank you for watching. My name is Eric Asher. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is